If Göbekli Tepe hadn't been found, none of this would have happened. But it's led to a widespread interest in the whole area. So while excavation may have stopped at Göbekli Tepe or may have slowed down, it is continuing elsewhere.
Massive broken T-pillar with the hands coming around the navel, classic design.
Giving us incredible insights into the mysterious world of the ancients.
For years, archaeologists believed Sayburç was just another Göbekli Tepe, another mysterious temple built by hunter-gatherers in southeastern Turkey. Same region, same time period, same people. That assumption shaped every single interpretation since its discovery in 2021. But after 4 years of careful excavation, researchers have finally revealed Sayburç's biggest secret. The discovery that explains exactly why this site is fundamentally unlike its famous neighbor. Sayburç isn't a ritual center where nomads gathered for ceremonies. It's a permanent village, with houses, storage pits, grinding stones, and the oldest narrative artwork ever discovered, carved human figures interacting with leopards and bulls in a fully composed scene. That distinction demolishes the entire model of how civilization began. Because if Sayburç and Göbekli Tepe existed simultaneously, just 35 miles apart, but represent completely different ways of life. One settled, one nomadic, one depicting humans, one avoiding them. The story of human progress was never true. There wasn't one path to civilization. There were many. We missed it. Let me show you the evidence. The discovery. The site is called Sayburç. It sits in Turkey's Şanlıurfa province, in the Fertile Crescent, where agriculture and civilization supposedly originated in a neat, predictable sequence. Here's the catch. Sayburç doesn't follow that sequence. It breaks it completely. The relief Dr. Özdoğan's team excavated measures roughly 11 feet by 5 feet, carved into vertical limestone. The scene shows human figures in procession, complete bodies with arms, legs, torsos in proper proportion, faces visible in profile. One central figure holds a ceremonial rattle raised overhead. Flanking the humans, 2 leopards with exaggerated male anatomy and a bull in detailed profile. This is narrative art. Storytelling through arranged imagery, multiple figures interacting within a single composed scene, and, according to everything we thought we knew about human cultural development, it shouldn't exist for another 4,000 years. But that's not the secret. That's just the surface. The architectural divide. To understand why Sayburç changes everything, you need to understand what it was supposed to be. When archaeologists first identified the site, they assumed it was another node in the Göbekli Tepe network, part of the same cultural system that built those famous circular enclosures with massive T-shaped pillars just 35 miles away. Same region, same time period, same people. Except nothing about Sayburç matches Göbekli Tepe. Nothing. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Göbekli Tepe is famous for its architecture, circular enclosures with massive limestone pillars, some weighing 20 tons, arranged in concentric rings with geometric precision, radial symmetry, abstract mathematical principles imposed on landscape, the same template repeated across centuries. Now look at Sayburç. Rectangular structures, not circular, built partially against natural rock formations, following the topography instead of overriding it. Stone benches carved directly from bedrock, not massive pillars quarried and transported from elsewhere. This isn't a regional variation. This is a completely different architectural tradition based on completely different organizing principles. And get this, the construction techniques require entirely different skills. Göbekli Tepe's pillars demanded extraordinary labor mobilization, hundreds of workers quarrying massive stones, carving them into T-shapes, transporting them across rough terrain, erecting them vertically in prepared pits. This is the kind of coordinated effort that supposedly required periodic gatherings of scattered nomadic groups. Sayburç's architecture is semi-subterranean, carved from bedrock, integrated with natural features. The benches aren't moved megaliths. They're created by removing stone around them, leaving raised surfaces that emerge from the living rock. Less mass labor, different specialized skills, working with the landscape rather than against it. Dr. Özdoğan put it directly in the 2025 analysis. The architectural principles at Sayburç suggest a fundamentally different approach to space and construction than what we see at Göbekli Tepe. These aren't variations within a single tradition. They're distinct building cultures. When she presented those findings to colleagues at an Ankara conference, the room went silent. Distinct building cultures means distinct peoples, distinct belief systems, distinct paths to civilization, all existing simultaneously in the same region of prehistoric Turkey. Think about what that means. Two different architectural traditions, 35 miles apart, same time period, and we had no idea until 2021, but the buildings were just the beginning. The artistic revolution. The artwork is where everything falls apart. At Göbekli Tepe, the massive T-shaped pillars are covered with animal carvings, snakes coiling around edges, foxes frozen mid-leap, scorpions, birds, wild boars, all executed with impressive skill. But here's what's critical. These animals appear as isolated figures. They don't interact. They don't tell stories. Each carving is a discrete symbolic element. And human representation at Göbekli Tepe? Rare, deliberately abstract. The T-pillars themselves may represent stylized human forms. Horizontal top, suggesting a head. Vertical shaft, a body. But they're geometric, not naturalistic. When human body parts appear, they're isolated elements. A carved arm here, a hand there. Never complete figures with recognizable anatomy. This appears to be intentional. Whatever belief system operated at Göbekli Tepe, it apparently prohibited, or at least deliberately avoided, naturalistic human imagery. Sayburç throws that prohibition out completely. The relief panel shows clearly representational human. Figures, arms positioned holding objects, legs in walking poses, bodies in proper proportion, faces visible in profile with recognizable features. These aren't abstract symbols requiring specialized knowledge to decode. Anyone viewing this scene, regardless of cultural background, can immediately identify it as showing humans and animals engaged in activity. But here's the deal. It's not just that humans are depicted, it's how they're depicted.
The evidence now very strongly suggests, thanks to discoveries on Cyprus, that there was sailing, even in the Ice Age before the time of Göbekli Tepe, between the mainland of Turkey and what we have on Cyprus itself.
The composition tells a story. The central figure holds a ceremonial object overhead. Leopards flank symmetrically, creating visual balance. A bull appears in profile. Additional human figures at different scales suggest procession or ceremony. The spatial relationships between figures aren't random. They're planned to guide the viewer's eye through a narrative sequence. This is compositional storytelling, and according to conventional art history timelines, it shouldn't appear until around 5000 BCE at the earliest, in Mesopotamia and Egypt, thousands of years after agriculture and writing. Yet here it is, fully formed, 9000 BCE. The human figures themselves show anatomical understanding that defies the timeline. Arms and legs in proper proportion to bodies. Torsos with visible structure suggesting musculature. One figure clearly holds an object, a rattle or ceremonial implement, which requires the artist to conceive and execute the relationship between human hand and held object. That's a sophisticated representational challenge. Most prehistoric art doesn't even attempt it. Dr. Lee Clare, who specializes in Neolithic iconography, reviewed the evidence. What he said made the excavation team go quiet. The sophistication of the narrative composition suggests artistic traditions that were already mature, not experimental first attempts at figurative representation. Let that sink in. Already mature, not developing, not emerging, not experimenting, mature. This wasn't the beginning of figurative art. This was the product of a tradition that had been developing for who knows how long, centuries, millennia, we have no idea. Because wherever this artistic lineage came from, it's not in the archaeological record, which raises an obvious question. Where did this tradition come from? And why does it exist at Sayburç, but not at its famous neighbor, just 35 miles away? The conventional explanation would be that Sayburç represents a later developmental stage, figurative art evolving gradually over centuries. But radiocarbon dating eliminates that. Both sites date to approximately 9000 BC. These weren't sequential developments. They were parallel traditions, Same time, same region, radically different outcomes. Either these cultures developed independently despite geographic proximity, which would mean the Neolithic Revolution wasn't a single event, but multiple simultaneous innovations. Or they shared a common ancestor, sophisticated enough to spawn both traditions, one that predates both sites and remains completely unknown to archaeology. Neither explanation is comfortable. Both suggest depths to prehistoric culture that our current models simply cannot account for. If you want to see more discoveries that shatter what the textbooks told you, subscribe right now. Because what they found beneath those carvings, that's where the entire model collapses. The technical mastery. The technical execution makes this even more impossible to explain. The Sayburç panel uses a technique called champleve relief, also known as sunk relief. The artist marks the entire design on the rock face first, then systematically removes background stone to a consistent depth across the whole panel. Only after establishing this relief framework does detailed modeling begin. Rounded bodies, protruding limbs, facial features. The relief depth runs 5 to 10 centimeters. That's substantial stone removal requiring consistent technique across an 11-foot composition. Every inch of background cut to the same depth. Every figure emerging at the same level. You can't improvise this. You have to plan the entire scene in advance. Understand how the final result should look. Map out every figure's position before removing a single chip of stone. Then execute it coherently so viewers understand relationships between figures, all while carving into limestone with stone tools, where one wrong strike can destroy hours of work. That's not experimentation, that's mastery. That's a mature artistic tradition with established techniques passed down through generations. In 9000 BCE, Göbekli Tepe's pillar, carvings use similar relief techniques for individual animals. The skill level is comparable, but each animal at Göbekli Tepe is a discrete element, beautiful in isolation without narrative relationships to other carvings. Creating an integrated narrative scene requires significantly more. Maintain consistent scale across multiple figures. Create spatial relationships that read correctly. Design visual flow that guides attention. Execute everything while carving into solid rock, where mistakes can't be erased. Whoever created the Sayburç relief possessed these skills 11,000 years ago. But here's where it gets crazy. The carved humans and leopards and bulls, that wasn't the real secret. That was just the announcement. What the 2025 excavations found beneath those buildings would destroy the conventional timeline entirely. The settlement evidence. The 2025 excavations found evidence of permanent settlement. Not temporary campsites, not seasonal gathering spots, not intermittent ritual occupation, permanent habitation, people living at Sayburç year-round, raising families, storing food, building homes intended to last. This changes everything. Let me explain why. Göbekli Tepe's entire interpretation rests on what isn't there. Decades of excavation have found no houses, no domestic structures, no storage facilities, no hearths in domestic contexts, no grinding stones in quantity, no middens, those accumulated trash heaps that form wherever people live for extended periods. None of the archaeological signatures indicating year-round habitation. The site is clean, ritual clean. People came, built, worshipped, and left, over and over, for centuries. But they never stayed. This absence is central to the argument that Göbekli Tepe was a ritual center, a temple complex where scattered nomadic groups periodically gathered for ceremonies, built the enclosures, then dispersed back to mobile hunting and gathering lifestyles. The model it created goes like this. Religion came before agriculture. Nomads built temples first. The need to maintain sacred sites encouraged repeated returns to the same locations. Repeated returns led to semi-sedentary lifestyles. Semi-sedentary life eventually produced deliberate cultivation of plants and domestication of animals. And only then, after millennia of gradual transition, permanent agricultural villages finally emerged. Monuments before houses, ritual before settlement, religion before farming. It's an elegant theory. It explained how hunter-gatherers without agriculture could mobilize enough labor to build massive stone monuments. It provided a driving force for civilization's emergence. It gave the Neolithic revolution a narrative, and Göbekli Tepe seemed to prove it perfectly. Sayburç destroys it. The excavations revealed rectangular stone foundations with interior features, hearths blackened from years of use, storage areas with residue still clinging to the walls, dedicated activity zones worn smooth by repeated daily tasks. These aren't specialized ritual buildings, they're houses, domestic structures showing unmistakable patterns of daily use. The team found artifact distributions revealing food preparation areas, animal bones with cut marks, broken pottery, processing debris, tool manufacturing locations with stone flakes scattered, around worked cores, storage zones with remnants of organic containers. This is the spatial organization of homes where people actually lived, cooked their meals, made their tools, raised their children. The structures cluster in what appears to be a planned village layout, buildings oriented in relation to each other, shared pathways between structures, communal spaces, not random ritual installations. A community, and get this, grinding stones, large flat stones with handheld implements for processing grain into flour. This is labor-intensive work that only makes sense for sedentary populations processing substantial harvests. Not mobile foragers grinding minimal amounts as needed. Think about what grinding stones represent. Someone at Sayburç collected cereals in quantities large enough to require dedicated processing equipment. They didn't eat the grain immediately. They brought it to a permanent location, stored it, processed it over time using heavy tools that couldn't easily be transported. That's agricultural behavior, food production, not just food collection. Storage pits containing charred botanical remains, seeds, grain fragments, traces of processed cereals, show planning for future consumption. Surplus, harvested, stored in prepared facilities, accessed over time rather than consumed immediately. These aren't small caches, they're substantial storage facilities, dug deep into the earth, lined to protect contents from moisture and pests. The labor investment is significant. The pits required communal planning. You don't dig storage facilities unless you intend to stay. You don't invest labor preparing for next season unless you expect to be there next season. The very existence of these pits demonstrates forward-thinking social organization, people coordinating activities around shared expectations of permanence. This is agricultural society, settled life, civilization. The cumulative evidence points to one conclusion. Sayburç was a settled village with permanent year-round occupation, possibly one of the earliest known villages in human history. People woke up here every morning, cooked meals over hearths that burned for generations, stored grain for winters yet to come, raised children who would raise their own children in the same stone houses, existing at the same time as Göbekli Tepe, 35 miles away. The paradigm shift. Think about what this means. If Sayburç shows permanent settlement while Göbekli Tepe shows none, and both date to approximately 9,000 BCE, then multiple pathways to civilization occurred simultaneously in the same region. Some groups built monumental ritual centers without settling permanently, gathered, built, worshipped, dispersed. Others settled into permanent villages, developed agricultural practices, created sophisticated narrative art within their domestic settlements. These aren't sequential stages in a single pathway, they're parallel developments. Different cultural choices, different social organizations, different ways of being human at the dawn of civilization. Here's the deal. If two radically different approaches coexisted within 35 miles, what does that tell us about human nature? The standard narrative assumes predictable developmental stages, that given enough time, all societies progress through the same sequence, hunting to agriculture, to monuments, to cities, simple to complex, primitive to sophisticated. It's a comforting story. It suggests progress is inevitable, that civilization follows natural laws. Sayburç demolishes that story. The people at Sayburç and Göbekli Tepe almost certainly knew of each other. 35 miles is a few days' walk at most. Trade goods, information, probably people flowed between communities. Archaeological evidence from other sites in the region shows extensive exchange networks during this period. Yet, despite contact, despite shared climate and environment, despite access to the same resources and Technologies, they maintained completely distinct identities through completely different architectural, artistic, and social traditions. One group chose monumental temples, the other chose permanent homes. One avoided human imagery, the other celebrated it. One gathered and dispersed, the other stayed. That's not cultural evolution following inevitable laws. That's choice, human choice, 11,000 years ago. The implications terrify conventional archaeology. If complex artistic traditions, sophisticated social organization, and architectural innovation existed at agriculture's very origins, not developing gradually afterward, the entire timeline of human cultural development needs reassessment. Consider what we're actually seeing at Sayburç, a community of several hundred people living in permanent stone houses arranged in a planned settlement, processing and storing agricultural surplus in dedicated facilities, creating sophisticated narrative artwork using mature, sculptural techniques, maintaining distinct cultural traditions, while neighboring groups chose entirely different paths. This isn't a primitive society stumbling towards civilization. This isn't just early humans experimenting with settled life. This is full civilization, fully operational, 11,000 years ago. The narrative figurative art alone should have been impossible. The settlement evidence should have been impossible. The combination of both in the same site, contemporaneous with Göbekli Tepe's very different cultural expression, shatters every simple model of how civilization emerged. And here's what haunts the researchers working on this period. If Sayburç was hiding in plain sight just 35 miles from one of the most heavily excavated prehistoric sites on Earth, a site that has drawn global attention for decades, what else is waiting? How many anomalies have been dismissed because they didn't fit established narratives? How many sites misinterpreted because researchers looked for confirmation rather than contradiction? The 2025 analysis doesn't just reveal what makes Sayburç different. It reveals our categories were wrong from the start. The relief panel alone should have rewritten textbooks, naturalistic human figures, narrative composition, sophisticated sculptural technique, all of it 4,000 years ahead of schedule. Combined with settlement evidence, storage facilities, grinding stones, planned village layout. What we're seeing isn't an anomaly. It's proof that our entire understanding of early human civilization was based on incomplete evidence. That's the biggest secret of Sayburç, not just that it's different from Göbekli Tepe, but that its existence proves the framework we've been using to understand human origins was fundamentally incomplete. The conventional narrative gave us a clean story: hunter-gatherers, then ritual centers, then agriculture, then settlements, then cities, then civilization. Neat progression. Predictable stages. Sayburç demolishes it. 11,000 years ago, multiple forms of society coexisted in the same small region. Some built temples without settling. Others settled without building temples. Some created abstract symbolic art. Others produced sophisticated figurative narratives. Some gathered periodically and dispersed. Others built homes and stayed for generations. There was no single path to civilization, because there was no single civilization to begin with. There were many, running in parallel, making different choices, achieving different outcomes, and we had no idea until a trowel-scraped limestone in 2021. So, here's my question for you. If Sayburç rewrites what we thought we knew about civilization's origins, what other sites are waiting to be discovered? What else have we gotten wrong? What other anomalies are sitting in the archaeological record, dismissed because they didn't fit the models we were using? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know what you think. Was there a single path to civilization, or were there always many? Did humans follow predictable stages, or were we making choices from the very beginning? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because discoveries like Sayburç don't just add details to history, they completely demolish the stories we've been telling ourselves. And the next one could be even bigger. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next discovery that changes everything.